إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Dear brothers, I bear witness that there is no deity but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his servant and messenger. Dear brothers, going back to the purity foundation of Islam, the core value of purity, to have a pure heart as the one of the important goals in achieving, through our daily prayers and acts of worship, to have a pure heart, to cleanse ourselves on the outside and also, more importantly, on the inside. And we talked about the qalb al-salim, the pure heart, that is the only way to salvation on the Day of Judgment. يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. On a day that money or children will not benefit anyone except he who comes to Allah with a pure heart. And we also talked about how the pure heart comes from repeated actions of making good decisions and avoiding bad decisions. And remember the beautiful hadith that the Prophet ﷺ has told us, that the heart, every time you do something, it affects it. If you do something good, you get a white dot in your heart. And you keep getting white dots until your heart shines. If you keep doing good things. And if you do one bad deed, it leaves a mark. It leaves a dark mark on your heart. And those dark marks keep accumulating until the heart is, wal-'iyadhu billah, engulfed in darkness. So today, after reminding myself and you about the purity foundation, the purity core value, that valuable task that we should achieve, I would like to take it one step further. One step further in real life terms. Today I'm going to talk about a topic that is difficult for some people to hear about, maybe even disturbing, but it stems right from what we're trying to achieve or what we're trying to avoid with this core value of reaching purity. Purity. But you may ask yourself, why purity? Well, the answer is simple. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you with a pure heart, it makes doing good deeds easy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it into a law that if you seek guidance and you take a step in the right path, He will help you take the next step after that. وَالَّذِينَ اهْتَدَوْا زَادَهُمْ هُدًى وَآتَاهُمْ تَقْوَاهُمْ. And those who are guided, He will give them further guidance. And He will give them the taqwa in the heart. Taqwa is the ultimate stage of purity in the heart. So doing good deeds comes easy after having a pure heart. And if the good deeds seem to be difficult to do, seem to be like mountains, then don't question what you need to do. Don't say that's difficult. But perhaps you should look inside. See, why do you feel that it's so difficult? Why do you feel that it's so difficult to wake up for Fajr prayers? Or come to the masjid more often? Why do you feel so difficult to make zakah? Or more than zakah, sadaqah? Why is it difficult to do this, fast for the sake of Allah, outside Ramadan? If it sounds difficult, then it's really not difficult. It's just maybe the heart needs to be a little more cleansing, so it can find renewed energy into doing what is good. So that's why we need to have a pure heart. So we can, because it's the stepping stone for doing good. And doing good is the stepping stone for living happy in this life before the next. So what happens when we don't do good? You know, problems the problems don't start with the way we think. Problems start with following the desires. Ittiba' shahawat. Ittiba' shahawat is the beginning of the deviation. Of course, there are shahawat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in us to sustain life. Food, water, drinks, reproduction, all of that, as long as they are put in the right path. And if those desires are put in the wrong path, those first steps that people take in the wrong path, to utilize those shahawat in the wrong path, that is the beginning of the problem right there. Because what happens is, even good people, when they start sacrificing the purity foundation of Islam, but they still have Islam in their mind and in their heart, what happens? They fall into a contradiction. And they fall into a contradiction between what they believe in their mind and what they have been brought up upon and what they know to be right on one end, and on the other end, their behavior. And that contradiction creates pain. And that pain can mount. That pain can accumulate. And it causes stress. But the thing is, no one stays in high stressful situation forever. People start trying to find a new balance. And as they are trying to find a new balance between their behavior, what real life is, and between their values, their beliefs, what they know in their mind and heart to be true, but not in their action. That contradiction and the pain it creates, people try to find solutions for that, even when they're subconsciously, when they don't realize it. They will face one of two solutions. They will either correct their behavior to lessen that pain of contradiction, or more seriously, they will start adjusting their frame of reference. They start adjusting their standard. They start adjusting their values, because they can't live in this contradiction forever. And then they start, as they begin to adjust their values to shy away from pain, they rationalize that. They employ their cognitive abilities and mental abilities into a rationalization mode to try to justify even part of their behavior to lessen the pain of contradiction. They're not really seeking seeking truth or research or scholarship. It's just a justification mode. It's your mind playing tricks on you. It's all a cognitive bias. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks about the pure heart, He does not connect that pure heart with any time or place. You don't be a rocket scientist to have a pure heart. You don't need to be in an advanced civilization. You can be living in a stone age and you could still seek that pure heart. You can have very little knowledge or a lot of knowledge and still know how to seek that pure heart. You can be the most famous person in the world, a scientist, an engineer, a wealthy person, or a very poor person, and you could still have the same shot at achieving the pure heart and cleansing yourself. It is independent of your cognitive abilities, but your cognitive abilities may be hostage to that behavior to justify it at some point. So with that, with knowing how serious this, you see how it starts from a simple deviation in following desires, to a behavioral problem. And then as that behavioral problem sets in, it becomes a mental problem. It becomes, you start changing. That's how people are lost. If you ever wonder how people are lost, this is how they are lost. If you ever come to a person, you might see a person who perhaps you knew 10 years ago, who was a devout Muslim, prayers, fasting, All of that obligations are done appropriately, and then all of a sudden you see them a lot different. This is how it starts. And then the thing is, you start talking to them, but you cannot really connect because and I'll come to real life examples in a minute, but you cannot really connect because you got to understand what level are you talking to this person about. Are they in the justification mode? Are they in the rationalization mode? Are they just seeking ways to adjust their frame of reference so they can justify at least part of their actions? Or are they still in the behavioral mode where they still decide not to change their frame of reference? They still abide by their standard. They just can't reach it, but they still abide it, and it causes them pain. Or is it in the far simpler steps before you even take those first steps toward wrongful desires? With this, let's come to real life examples. A very painful topic. Very painful. I would like to briefly talk about the topic of addiction. And the topic of addiction is disturbing, not fun to talk about, not fun to listen to. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you and you don't know what I'm talking about. But that's good. But even if you don't know, if you have never experienced that, you should listen, because maybe somebody you love may experience that. Maybe a teenager that you had such a high hopes for. You have to know what's at risk here. Maybe a husband, maybe a close friend or a close relative. It is like the abyss. It is like that black hole lurking out. People get sucked into and they never come out. So where does this addiction come from? Or where does it actually, what are the coordinates? Where does it live in the fabric of society? People take first steps in the wrongful desires, and they get in problems. They justify their behavior. They maybe even start rationalizing things. But at some point, it flips into an automatic mode. Those bad things that people do just spiral out of proportion. And addiction comes as substance addiction, or sexual addiction, or gambling. There are multiple faces to the problem of addiction. And a lot of times you see it with people, you see it with multiple faces of the same problem, to a varying degree. And if you see somebody in the early phases, maybe they're still amenable to good talking. You remind them of Allah, you remind them of their duties, remind them of the day after. Maybe you could still reach their heart. But at some point, it becomes they become so hostage to it that you may even not be able to reach them in the regular tools. That's why you need to be conscientious of what phase they are in this. Those problems, those real problems, maybe you don't see them very in front of you, but there are three places in society where you get exposed to them. Either the places where bad things happen, the places where people drink or commit zina or whatever they do. Those back alley, dark places. Or the other place you could get exposed to these kind of people is the hospital. They come with a whole lot of problems. And in this setting, I would like to remind myself and you of the hadith the Prophet ﷺ has said that on the Day of Judgment, no person will pass until they are asked several questions, and one of those questions about this body. We think this body is ours. This body is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This body is a resource that we have to do what we need to do. But this body is a amana. This body is is something we are accountable for. What have we done with it? Just like the other resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provide with us. You'll be asked about your money, where you got it and where you spend it. You'll be asked about your body, what have you done with it? And they come to the hospital, very bad shape. Drunk, drugs, other problems. And the third place that you see these people is in the law enforcement establishments, because that's the ultimate destination for that behavior is either the jail or the hospital or both. So substance abuse. The first, and when you understand how this happens from a seeking desire to a behavioral problem to an adjustment in the frame of reference and values, then you can easily understand how people talk about what they talk about. Let's start with something very simple. Which is tobacco. Okay. People want to smoke. Unfortunately, it's very common. The first thing you hear when you talk to people about tobacco is, well, brother, it's not haram, or maybe it's not haram, it's not conclusive that it's haram, there is no definitive evidence that it's haram. And I tell them, okay, well, whether it's haram, or makruh, or mubah, or whatever other classification you want to change, it does not change what tobacco is. And it does not change the consequences of consuming tobacco. That is a rationalization. You steer away from the real problem, you steer away from the addiction into another justification mode. Because the issue is not whether you can prove conclusively that it's haram or not. What is proven conclusively is really bad for you. And why do you want to continue it? There is really one answer to that. Justify it as much as you want. It's addiction. It's addiction. And it's a pretty bad one. Although not in the most destructive form of addiction. Okay? If we have time now, we'll talk about it. If not, inshallah, next khutbah. But it can get a whole lot uglier. And then what other rationalization? You hear about this. Well, my cousin smoked for 50 years and then he died of a car accident. Or died something completely unrelated to tobacco. Okay, well, now that you bring it up, you have to understand something about statistics. If you introduce a particular agent, let's say a cigarette, to society, and let's just sum up all the bad complications, heart, lung, cancer, whatever you want, all of that, let's just sum up into 1% of bad outcome. And that bad outcome becomes, let's say it's 50%. Yes, I can't tell you if you're one of those 50% or if you're one of the other 50% that is not going to be affected. But I can guarantee you, with a whole lot of certainty, there is 50% of people that are going to be affected badly. So that is a cognitive bias. That is when you want to look at things from an individualistic standpoint rather than from community standpoint, because it serves the addiction. It serves the same thing, the addiction. It is the utilization of the mental abilities and mental arguments and cognition to justify the behavior. Because if you don't justify the behavior, you fall into the contradiction and the pain associated with that contradiction. If you don't try to change the frame of reference just a little bit. Now, if your question is, well, it's really hard to quit, that's a question for another topic. But you don't change the way you think to serve the deviant behavior. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of a press secretary. You know, a particular decision or statement comes out of the White House, and no matter how much that makes sense or doesn't make sense, there is a poor man that needs to stand in front of people and justify that decision, no matter how right or wrong it is. That is what the brain is doing. That is exactly what the brain is doing. Hostage to the addiction. Well, what about alcohol? Alcohol. Well, there's one solution for alcohol. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us what that solution is, and stay away from it. There is one solution. Stay away from it. And let me tell you about another solution that finally the Western medicine have reached. And that solution is, there is approximately 15% of the population that will be severely devastated by alcohol. You bring alcohol to a society and you will guarantee it, statistically, 15% will be severely disturbed, severely affected. Almost their lives will be crushed by alcohol. And for those 15%, do you know what they say? Do you know what the solution is? Stay away from it. Not a single sip. So the difference between Islam and Western philosophy, the dealing with alcohol, in Islam, let's protect the whole society. Let's protect the whole society. And there is one solution, stay away from it. And in Western frame of mind, let's wait till we identify who's going to be crushed. Let's wait till we see who are those 15% that their lives are going to be ruined completely, and we tell them, those people, after their lives are ruined, stay away from it. That's the only difference. If you find that is to be making any sense, well, that's reality. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. Dear brothers, at some point, addiction becomes so severe that medical intervention needs to happen. Because you cannot communicate with these people. You know, I see them at the hospital, and they come, you know, in an extremely disgusting presentation. And my judgment is always held in check by the families around them. Because the families around them, they don't see them for the scumbags they are. They see their children. They see their husbands and wives and kids. You know, to me, they may look disgusting, but, you know, to their family, there is a person there. And they want to save that person, and they want to reach to that person. So they seek help. And yes, there's definitely very well tried out and tested and time-honored way to help addiction. But I'm not here to teach you about how to treat addiction. If you have addiction, you need to seek medical help. And addiction, again, comes in multiple phases. Substance addiction, sexual addiction, gambling. You know, if you spend 10 hours a day playing a video game, you have a problem. You surely have a problem, whether you want to recognize it or not. And more importantly, you are at risk of more problems in the future. If you know, again, it's a really difficult topic to talk about, but there is no way around it. But if you're addicted to websites or to dance places or whatever they are, you have a problem. You need to seek help. But again, I'm not here to tell you about how to seek help, or that is a more specialized issue. What I'm here to tell you is where it starts. It starts with simple steps in the wrong direction. Be careful of those simple steps. Don't take them. If you take them, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiveness. Clean yourself. Do you know how you clean yourself? Do you know how to clean yourself? You clean yourself by doing your prayers. You clean yourself by supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're not doing your prayers, you know, don't be, you know, like astonished. Oh, wow, I'm not getting clean. How come I'm not getting clean? Well, what are you doing to getting clean? You know, you think this is actually going to be resolved with your mental abilities? You can reason your way through cleaning and getting pure? No, you work your way to get pure. You have to work at it. Remember the first day of Ramadan and the last day of Ramadan. Did you feel different? Most people say they feel different. That's what I'm talking about. So you have to work at cleaning yourself. So you don't go take those first steps. And if you did take those first steps and you have a behavioral problem, beware of changing your standard so you can even partially justify that behavior. Beware, you're getting into another problem right there. You're adding another layer on top of your heart. So you can't reach the pure heart anymore. And if you got to a point where you're mentally convinced with the arguments that so happen conveniently to justify and entertain the addiction, then you have to talk to people who can restructure those arguments and defeat them. Because your mind is playing tricks on you. اللهم اقسم لنا من خشيتك ما تحول به بيننا وبين معاصيك ومن طاعتك ما تبلغنا به جنتك ومن اليقين ما تهون به علينا مصائب الدنيا ومتعنا اللهم بأسماعنا وأبصارنا وقوتنا ما أحييتنا واجعله الوارث منا واجعل ثأرنا على من ظلمنا وانصرنا على من عادانا ولا تجعل مصيبتنا في ديننا ولا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا ولا تسلط علينا بذنوبنا من لا يخافك ولا يرحمنا اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا اللهم فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت فإنك تقضي بالحق ولا يقضى عليك إنه لا يذل من واليت ولا يعز من عاديت، تباركت ربنا وتعاليت، فلك الحمد على ما قضيت.